Welcome to Conversations About Construction. I'm Dave Trafford. This podcast is produced and presented by the Residential and Civil Construction Alliance of Ontario. Members of the Alliance build your homes. They build your transportation networks and the systems that deliver safe, clean drinking water to your kitchen sink. This series will focus on industry innovations and solutions that support sustainable economic development and Ontario's world-class standard of living. In this episode, Careers in Construction. Our guests are Richard Lyall. He's the director of the Residential and Civil Construction Alliance of Ontario, also the president of the Residential Construction Council of Ontario. And Jon Callegher. He's the executive director of Job Talks. Capacity in the infrastructure sector is going to be an issue, if for no other reason than just getting infrastructure back up on standing on its feet after the effects of COVID-19. But we've also been talking about the RCCAO engaging in an initiative to start to build more housing that is going to help us deal with our long-term care facilities, make sure that we have addressed what's going on with health, hallway health care. So the possibilities here are that we are not only going to see sort of releasing the hose and the water coming out as far as those jobs are concerned. We're going to see an increase in the need for jobs. Richard, is there enough capacity right now in the sector, not only to get the jobs done that we're on the rate on the table now or in the works, is there enough to move this thing forward to kind of deal with the infrastructure we're going to need to jumpstart the economy?
Absolutely. We're in a state of flux right now. There's still a period of chaos that we're going through, but I think things are going to settle down quite quickly. I'm not worried about our having the necessary labor forces to do the work. We've been asked that question before in the past, do we have enough people? And I said, well, let the industry worry about that. And we are also going to see some changes, I think, going forward with respect to commercial construction and other areas. So we might have additional forces available to us to build housing that we might not otherwise have had. So it's not a real concern at this stage.
I guess when we get into that, you can start to consider how this is going. In other sectors, there's the likelihood that we're going to see people who've gone through the pressures of dealing with the frontline COVID, and many of the construction sites have been considered that. You're going to see a lot of people end their careers. I've had enough. There's been enough going on here. There's been so much pressure to do that. Is there any worry at that end, Richard, that we're going to lose some, real historic memory and experience in the industry?
Yeah, I think there is the potential for that. We still have quite a few baby boomers working in the industry, and we'd already cited shortages to come and challenges with respect to training. And we could have some boomers that might decide, well, look, I don't want to take the risk anymore. I'm going to retire now. I think that will be balanced in the short to medium term by a potential slowdown on some projects. And as I said, in the commercial sector. So, but there is a real challenge coming with respect to how do we get new people in the industry? How do we train them up, especially given the limitations now on education, because a lot of skilled trades education is in the area. It's hands-on. So, if there's limitations on the training that can be done there, that could present challenges. But I think we'll figure it out. Look, the industry's done an amazing job so far. It's actually been quite astounding, our record. We've continued to work through COVID. We've addressed, a half a dozen serious challenges, the big one being the health and safety challenge and how to have people working safely. So I think we can figure out some of these other challenges going forward. But it's going to be tough.
Yeah, I guess, John, that's the other side of this is that there's going to be that gap or that bubble at some point where the educational institutions are going to have to step up. And I know George Brown is an important part of that conversation, and particularly in this case, and how you not only produce enough to support the need, but how you get the word out that, you know what, there's some really great jobs and they're going to be well paying and there are long-term benefits here that people should be considering.
Absolutely. I mean, we're going to see shortages, especially in restaurant, service, retail, disproportionately affecting women and young people, the two groups that the construction industry has historically, worked really hard with not a lot of success in attracting. So there's that huge opportunity there to introduce the many benefits of working in construction beyond, as you mentioned, salary. If salary was something that young people especially aspire toward when they're young in terms of thinking of their careers, we may not have had the shortages that we have. So we've done research to look at other benefits in addition to salary, like you mentioned, Dave, security. So that's skills security, being able to have that kind of job mobility to work within the sector, but also across provinces and other countries in different languages, but also seeing the results of your work immediately, having work-life balance. And something that I've been really reflecting on recently as we all are sitting inside on our butts, getting a little bit heavier and needing to force ourselves to shave, let alone do some physical activity, is these are jobs that not require you, allow you to actually get physically active, use your body and brain. And in this digital age, I can't think of anything that is more important than to have a career that actually gets you moving.
Well, a good point. And I've been sitting in my big comfy chair in my studio for the last 8 weeks, and I think I've become part of the chair. So it's, I'm being productive, but I'm not being very active. So a good point. So to both of you, how do we integrate that idea, attracting new talent, and making people understand and aware of it, but also the degree to which you're going to have to shift the apprenticeship elements of all of this too? This is going to be a big part of it, no?
Yeah, it's going to be a big challenge. I see one opportunity there. There's a lot of people that are in hospitality, especially in the food service area, that are used to working with tools. It's manual, they're on their feet. And of course, the hospitality industry is going to take a hit going forward. So there's a lot of young people that may have thought about going in that area or are in that area, and they might want to switch over to skilled trades. There's a natural aptitude there. They might not eat as well, but I think there's some real opportunities there, and we're going to have to turn our minds to that. Then there's the challenge within how you actually teach, as I mentioned before. There's going to have to be adjustments there. There's a lot of e-learning right now that is not working well, but there are also models that work very well. But then how do you do the workshops and labs and that kind of thing that are going to be needed? But I think those things will get worked out.
John, clearly you've got some sort of plan at George Brown, and I would think a longer term plan that has been adjusted somewhat even in the last 8 weeks.
I know one idea that's been talked about not only at George Brown but other colleges is potentially, they say, front loading some of the classes in a program that would have involved being on site and getting those on the schedule. If they were in a later semester, having those ones that are in class, put those online, and then kind of wait and see what happens before we can make changes in regard to physical distancing and training on site.
Yeah, I like to call this not the new normal, but the next normal, because I suspect that between now and a year from now, we're going to go through 3, maybe 4 phases of what normal is. Is there something, John, that you look at and say, okay, there's sort of a timeline here that we're going to have to look at vis-a-vis how these jobs are recruited, how the educational institutions respond to that, and how they work together with industry?
Yeah, well, one thing that's been one benefit, people are getting more used to watching videos, right? And more reliant on videos. So it's the perfect time. As an example, throughout Ontario, the Ontario Youth Apprenticeship Program This is a high school focused body within Ontario educators. They are using our Job Talks, our video series of tradespeople, construction workers in their classrooms to show, instead of bringing in a speaker, you show a video or a series of videos and young people who love their jobs and create an assignment around it. So it's in line with recommendations that we've made earlier in partnership with RESCON and RCCAO about the need to invest in higher quality media to attract new, second career seekers and young people to the trades.
Yeah, I guess that cuts both ways, right, Richard? I mean, it's also the challenge for oftentimes if there's a criticism about the construction industry is we've always done it that way, and it's a tough thing to change.
Oh, absolutely. And I think, part of the problem was for a long time, the young people and their parents were actually blamed for a systemic failure to adjust. I mean, other jurisdictions in the world, like in Germany and Switzerland and Austria, for example, they've had very robust skilled trades training programs. The attitude there is that skilled trades are no less valuable than other professions. And the way the system works there is it doesn't actually bar someone from learning a skilled trade, then going on to engineering, and then, say, going into a business program or going to university if they want to. It's all quite seamless. We've got some real systemic problems, too, I was going to add. Like, for example, a couple of the challenges coming down the road is how colleges are allocating spaces for training programs. That'll be an issue. Part of the system, too, is that our apprenticeship registration system is still largely paper-based, like so many other things, and we've got to get that online, especially for things like distancing now and so on. But it's just antiquated.
So where does that lie? Where does that decision lie in terms of, breaking that mold? Because we're hearing that all the time. We're going to have to break what we have and have the courage to do it and then have a plan in place that's going to fill that gap in a hurry. So particularly where you talk about paper-based, where does that block happen?
Well, one of the things is that a bit of a challenge, and it's always been the case in Ontario. We've got three different ministries that are involved in education. One is there's a skills development ministry, there's an education ministry, and there's a colleges and universities ministry. And we really need to look at this as a seamless process and bring it together. And the resources will have to be there and the commitment to do it. There's an element of inertia that has been allowed to continue with respect to modernizing how all this works, and that needs to be fixed. Necessity will drive that. I mean, the old line about don't let a good disaster go to waste. Well, this is going to be one of those situations where we're now going to be forced to modernize certain things because the need is going to be there. The economy's got to work. And for the economy to work, you've got to have the skilled tradespeople there. And we know that going forward, our outlook is the demand for skilled trades is going to be one of the most promising areas for careers in Ontario. So we're going to have to make this work. And the drive will be there because the government's going to need the economic activity that we can produce.
Well, the phrase I like also is we need one throat to choke. So when we actually end up with, but you're right. I mean, we really just need one person or one group or one organization to point to and say, this is where the leadership is going to come from. Is that public sector or is it private sector, Richard?
Well, systemically, the skills development, for example, and if you're dealing with apprenticeship reform, that's really going to come down to that ministry, and that's public sector. You can't get around that. But I think the will be there to make this happen. I think we've got the right government in Ontario to make this happen. And we do have a robust Premier's office that can direct things from that level in terms of changes that will have to be made.
So, John, take me back again. First year, George Brown, somebody's coming in there and they're looking for their expectation now out of education generally. That's going to, what it was last September is going to be completely different or significantly different than what it will be in September of 2020. Are you getting a sense of that change in expectation yet?
I think the biggest there's a lot of anxiety. There's a lot of people, frankly, not I think looking forward to the idea of virtual learning as broadly as we're trying to characterize that term. But I think it's a good example as we go through the term this spring and potentially in the fall to draw some comparisons between having to learn via computer and try to get some knowledge versus having an actual mentor work with you one-on-one, which is something that 80% of construction workers get when they embark on that kind of career. So this idea of university as this romantic idea of university, of going into an institution of higher learning and having someone teach you and challenge you, and you challenge them, and then 4 years later you're standing on their shoulders, seeing the world even a little bit further than they have. It's not happening, and it hasn't been the case for a very long time. But that is the mindset that many parents and many teachers who have university degrees still remember and associate with a good life. I have a friend who's just started as an assistant professor at a university in Ontario. He has 800 students in one class. 800 students. Are you going to get mentorship? Absolutely not. I'm sorry. So we're going to see, I think, one of the outputs is the value, I think, that we should be putting on, one-on-one or one-to-few mentorship that we're simply not getting, frankly, at the university level and in some colleges as classroom sizes get bigger.
So is there a role there for your group, RESCON, or just the sector in general then, Richard, to be able to say, we have that history, we have that mental, acuity around our skills, particularly, that if you identified a cohort within that group that was able to say, I can translate this into this virtual element where, because, that's where your world has been. Has there been an effort to kind of bridge that gap with the educational institutions?
Oh, absolutely. More particularly with the government, I guess you could say. I'll just say government generally, because that ground has shifted a little bit. We only recently have now a new Ministry of Skills Development that's linked with labor, for example, and apprenticeship, as it should be. We have to tell government what we need and what we're seeing, what we're experiencing with respect to the candidates coming out. I mean, there's real challenges there with respect to, we're early into this e-learning thing. There are changes to apprenticeship systems that are going to have to incorporate e-learning much more into it. Right now, you've probably heard there's a lot of complaints about e-learning. It's both from college students and also from the, secondary school system and the public education system, because this caught us off guard. We were a little behind anyways. And so there's a lot of catching up to do to make that learning experience more meaningful. And as Jon said, where you've got that one-on-one connection there that's not there right now. So there's lots to be done there. I think it's going to put a lot more pressure on-site learning. Of course, as you know, in construction, in an apprenticeship, you get your in-class portion of training. There's a lot more room for simulation now and simulators to be used and things like that. But your on-site learning is going to be critical. So there's going to be a need for some aids there too for apprentices as they're learning on-site. But that's where you're really learning. Construction is on the job at the end of the day. So I think some of the models that we have right now where you go and work for a while and then you have to go back to school for 3 months, send that the way of the dodo bird. It's an old model. We need to change our scopes of practice in some of the trades. We have to realize that, probably a good proportion of the top trades in 10 years are going to be things we haven't thought of yet. We're going to have a lot more automation. We're going to be using drones. We're going to have technicians on site that are going to be there to repair equipment and things like that. And some of that equipment is going to be doing some of the jobs that we really don't want people to do. Like, for example, if you're in a hazardous, toxic environment or you're in tunnels or stuff like that, we're going to get to the point where we're going to be sending in machines, AI-driven machines, and we're going to be using augmented reality and virtual reality a lot more. So one of the things that you're going to see is construction is going to be going a lot more high tech. It already is already. I mean, it's a lot of people don't realize that aren't familiar with the industry, but this is going to accelerate so many trends in the industry right across the board. And I think many of them are going to be very positive because we've had barriers to many of these changes and improvements before, but now, of course, necessity is going to drive change. So it's good.
Virtual learning is one thing, and Richard just brings up the point, is also the virtual reality that we're really not so much as being a tool on the site, but a tool in the educational part of it. I can see that, the apprenticeship program all of a sudden takes on a virtual reality component.
Yeah, I'm struggling with answering this question because I think we're gonna have to learn a lot, especially in the post-secondary sector, as we begin implementing this kind of e-learning. The high schools and elementary schools have already been at it, and we've heard their experiences. And we're going to have a different set with a different kind of schedule. We also are in a scenario where we may have international students who went back to their home country, but will like to continue with the semester, and how that will work when you have class times that are scheduled at a certain time and they're in a different time zone. How to actually administer an exam without giving a real paper or written exam. We're being really encouraged to find alternative ways of evaluating if someone has learned something. So from my perspective, I'm going to be trying out oral or verbal exams. So you don't know something until you can teach it to someone else. And I'm going to put that to the test.
And just one last thought on that too, on e-learning. There are some phenomenal systems out there and it can work, but systemically there has been an opposition to e-learning because when you've got seated programs, they're more expensive because you have to spatially accommodate them. You've got to have a building and all that stuff. And so our institutions of education have not been quick off the mark in adopting that. We've seen that problem most recently in the school system in Ontario with the opposition to e-learning. It's not well received, but this is now forcing those changes to happen, which is a good thing. We're going to see, with the foreign student element there, that the college system is going to take a hit on foreign students because many of them aren't going to come back, not immediately. And then I think longer term that will change as the e-learning evolves too. The foreign student proposition is going to become even more of an immigration proposition as well too. So, but there's some very exciting things happening, and they're going to be painful, right? They're going to be painful, and some people are going to be really threatened by them. We're dealing with this in other elements of our industry where through technology and AR, VR, and AI, we're going to be supplanting and replacing certain functions that are basically redundant. We're not going to need it. So, but this will make it happen. So there's a downside and an upside depending on how you want to look at it.
Just buckle up. Because
you got it.
teeter-totter you're on. And as you're talking, I'm just realizing this is a whole new conversation that we should explore further down the road. But we've talked a lot about changing the mindset around education. To both of your points, what we're going to have to do is change the design of the educational space, just because physical distancing is going to be part of our next normal as we move this thing forward. We're not going to have, halls full of students with 800 in a classroom, for example, that will be acceptable anymore. So again, the pressure's back on you, Richard. You guys are just going to have to come up with ways to reinvent and rebuild all of those institutional spaces, because that's going to be part of it, right?
Well, absolutely. I mean, just look at the impact on the workforce overall. 25% of people say they're not going to ride public transit again. 70% of workers say, hey, I'm really liking working at home. I don't want to go back to an office. And we know that with the physical distancing that's going to be with us for a while, offices, by and large, the way they're currently configured, aren't going to work. So there's some pretty massive, and they will be lasting changes. Just look at what we're doing right now. I mean, our office transition, for example, from, a typical office to over a weekend, we were online Zoom meetings and whatever. And one of the things that we've realized, those meetings I used to have to go downtown for, say go to Queen's Park for, that were really a half an hour of meaningful meeting, but it blew out half a day to get there, park, get back, traffic. We don't have to do that anymore. I mean, we still have to have, humans are gregarious by nature. We like to socialize, but you don't need to socialize that much. So these are going to be fundamental, long-lasting changes that are going to require some very painful adjustments. But it's also going to be good, I think, in a lot of ways for people. People are happier working at home. They use their time more efficiently. They have more personal time. These are some of the things that we're realizing now. And we're realizing, well, I don't really need to go to that meeting. I can do a Zoom meeting. Our boardroom, for example, we're turning into a high-tech a Zoom center. I call it the Zoom room.
There might be a few of those around. Richard, Jon, thanks for doing this. It was an enlightened conversation, and I don't know if anybody else, but I learned a few things. Thanks.
Thanks, Dave. Appreciate it. Dave. Jon, good to see you.
You too, Richard.
Thanks to Richard Lyall and Jon Callegher for being our guest today. You've been listening to Conversations About Construction, and we'd encourage you to subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts and share it with your network. Conversations About Construction is produced for the Residential and Civil Construction Alliance of Ontario by iContact Productions. I'm Dave Trafford.